The reason you're here is this: Lab Up for Success with Cisco Modeling Labs. How many people have heard of CML or Cisco Modeling Labs? Oh, quite a few of you. Use it? Yeah? Less. We have some interesting opportunities today. For one, we are offering a 50% off promotion for CML for people at Cisco Live. We have a promo code if you don't already have CML. The other thing is right behind me and staring at me in a blue shirt there is Ralph Schmeider. He's one of the key or core developers for CML. And behind him, I think, is one of the other developers, Justin. So if after this talk you want to go speak with them, get more information, learn more about CML, they are right behind me at the demo booths, or right behind you in front of me at the demo booths there. There is an expression, it's actually a rather lame joke, I guess, in the US about how do I get to Carnegie Hall? It goes like, okay, how do I get to Carnegie Hall? It doesn't really translate well outside of the US, so I tried to make it a little bit more relevant for this particular area, for Amsterdam. So the expression then goes, how do I get to the Concertgebouw? Which I guess is a famous Holland concert hall. How do I get there? Well, how do you get there? You practice. Get it? How do I get to, it's lame, like I said. But it sets it up nicely, because the second part of this is, how do I get certified? You practice. That is the key. If you want to get a certification, if you want to develop the skills and really believe, really know, and have confidence in what you're going to be able to do, you need to practice those skills. Time and time again, not necessarily even just to get the certification, but to feel that you can do the work that's necessary, to feel that you can solve the problem, to feel that no matter what comes your way, you're going to be ready for it. And that's what practice gives you. And that's why we're here. That's why we have tools like Cisco Modeling Labs. You practice, you get the certification. And how are you going to practice? I'm going to show you. There are ways that you can use this software to be able to practice exactly in the same way that you would take the exam, to practice in the same network environments that you're going to face in production. One of the things we're going to do today is look at some examples. I tailored this talk based on a different breakout session I gave at Cisco Live in Melbourne. This QR code will give you access to the topologies, or I'm going to go over one topology today, but there's some other topologies here that you can load into your own copy of Cisco Modeling Labs and continue to do that practice. So, real quick, we're going to talk a little bit about what CML is. We're not going to go into too much depth because we've got the developers back there that can go into a little bit more. Talk a little bit about how you can read through our exam topics or our blueprints to really feel comfortable preparing for that exam. And finally, we'll walk through a sample lab. Does that sound good? Cool. So, what is CML? Cisco Modeling Labs is a virtual environment that gives you access to the actual the network operating systems that you would use either in production or that you are going to face when you take any one of our career certifications. So these aren't finite state machines, these aren't emulators, these are the actual operating systems like iOS, iOS XE, XR, and XOS that you are going to be using or you are going to be facing in your careers and for certification. You're able to do things like the test. I want to be able to say, if I make this configuration change in my network, how is it going to behave? What negative effects is it going to cause? Here for Cisco Live, I work in the network operations team, and one of the things I did was I wanted to model out some different configuration changes ahead of time. So I built the data center network that I was going to deploy here in Cisco Modeling Labs so I could test that out. It gave me that safe environment to do that testing. One of the other key elements of it is it gives you a practice environment. Going back to that practice, you can set up topologies, you can set up scenarios, and we'll look at one that you can then test and say, do I understand these concepts? Can I set up this scenario? Can I troubleshoot? Can I build? Can I design? Cisco Modeling Labs lets you do that. Fundamentally, it is a virtualization orchestration environment. It's very graphically driven. also has a very powerful REST API behind it. So you get a topology, and on that topology, you can build out any kind of network that you want. You can combine different operating systems. I mentioned all of our operating systems. You can combine third-party virtual network operating systems to build as real of a network as you can get. So you've got the graphical user interface, the topology, the canvas, and the palette. You've got the virtual network operating systems. Ours are included. We also have some open source operating systems that are included. And as I mentioned, you can add other things on top of that to really get a network that looks like what you might want to do in production or how you might want to study in the way you want to study. Underpinning the virtualization environment is based on Linux KVM. So any VM that you could run in Linux KVM, you could model or install into CML to really flesh out those topologies. You can also share the labs. So there's capability in there, and that's how I'm going to share that. If you scan that QR code and you look at that GitHub repository, that's how I'm already sharing the labs. So you can challenge your friends. You can say, okay, I've got this great idea. I've got this scenario that I can stump you with. Share that lab out. They can load it into their copy of CML and play with it. There are a lot of other features in here, like the ability to connect to external remote networks, to bring the physical world into the virtual world. The ability to have multiple people sharing console sessions. Ralph is going to do another one of these theater sessions later on in the week that is going to cover all of those, some of those more advanced features of CML. So I'm going to hold off on that, give them their chance to do that later on. The reason why CML is so important for this practice, for prepping, for getting ready for that certification, is because as you see, and anyone taking a test here at Cisco Live? A couple of you, few of you, great. Good luck. As you will see in some of these tests, you are going to face not just multiple choice questions. You're not just going to have the multiple choice, the drag and drop. Some of these tests now have what we call lablets, where you're forced to, or you're facing a virtual device, an actual virtual device, and a prompt, and you have to configure things. It's not select one of these options. It's configure spanning tree, configure a VLAN with routing, configure OSPF with these parameters, and you have the full power of the network operating system to do that. CML is what's underpinning those lablets. So as you practice in CML, you're practicing on the same kit that you would use to take that exam. So you're given that same environment. You can get very comfortable with what you're going to face when you sit down in that hot seat to take that test. So that's a brief introduction to CML. The next thing you need before you get ready, before you have that confidence, before you're ready to sit for that exam, is to really understand, where should I practice? What am I going to be asked to do, and at what level, so I know how I'm going to practice within Cisco Modeling Labs. And that's where the blueprints come in. So every time before you get ready to prepare for that exam, you should go to cisco.com, go to the Learning Network, and look at our exam blueprints. These are the topics that you will be expected to know at the level you will be expected to know them. And we use this thing, Bloom's taxonomy. So you'll note in each one of these blueprints, there are verbs: design, explain, describe. These verbs tell you at what level you need to know these things. And this is where CML is going to come into play. So at the lower level, you have things where you just have to remember. You have to enumerate some things or describe an element of something. As you move up from a complexity level, then you have to start applying. You have to start configuring things. This is where CML comes into play. Above that, you're analyzing. You're looking at output. You have to make decisions based on that output. And then at the very top, you're creating, you're designing. You're coming up with new ideas around things. So these are the verbs. These are what you're going to see as you read through those blueprints. And CML really comes into play when you're asked to configure something, when you're asked to analyze output, like debug output or show commands, or when you have to create something from scratch or design something. So let's take a very practical example. Anyone taking enterprise core, the enterprise technology core? One, okay, a few. So if you look at that blueprint, if you go to the exam topics for this test, you're going to notice there are a number of domains. And when you break down one of those domains, we won't do all of them, but we'll take a look at part of domain number 3. Domain 3 is infrastructure. So in 3.1, we have layer 2, and focus in on those verbs. You'll see things like you need to troubleshoot static and dynamic 802.1q trunking ports, configure and verify simple OSPF, configure and verify NAT and PAT. When you see those verbs, verify, configure, troubleshoot, these are things that you're going to be expected to do. And you might see them in a lablet form. You might be given a prompt and have to actually configure or actually troubleshoot or analyze output. This is where CML fits perfectly. You can lab up those scenarios in Cisco Modeling Labs and have ultimate confidence when you go and sit in that exam that you're going to be able to do these things. You'll have done them in the exact same environment that you're going to be tested on. And moreover, when you take those skills then back into the actual physical network devices that you're working with every day, you're going to have that same confidence because you're going to have done this. Very practically, let's look at a sample scenario. This scenario is in that Git repository. You can download the topology.yaml file. That will get you started. That'll have everything broken that we're going to walk through. And then there's also a solution with all the fixes in it. So you can start here, try to solve all the problems that we're going to face in this topology. And then if you get stuck, you can compare it to the solution. So you load this in Cisco Modeling Labs. You just click the import button, point to the YAML file that you'll download, and you'll have that scenario ready to go. The scenario in question is this, and this comes from the ENRZ exam. So the Enterprise Advanced Routing and Switching. It's not an actual question on the test, but it's something that you could face, something very similar to a question you could face on the test. This is the topology. It's multiple BGP ASs, and there are a slew of problems in here. And you're going to be asked to troubleshoot this. So specifically, there's a few problems here. For one, you have to figure out why the various elements of this topology aren't working correctly. The scenario, the sample will have all of the problems. But first of all, we're going to start from the left and from router 1, move through the autonomous systems and try to fix all of these problems. So first of all, if we do a show IP BGP summary, and this command works just like it would on a physical device, we're going to see that something is funny with my animations here. We're going to see that the peers are flapping on these interfaces. How do we fix that? Well, we're going to go in and take a look at the actual output that we get from the device. Again, the show commands, the configuration commands, they work exactly the same way because you're given a full instance of the network operating system. In this case, all of the devices in our topology, all of these devices are iOS. They behave like a ISRG2 router. So one of the old classical iOS routers. You could also load iOS XE and do this, but in this case, you're given full iOS capability. So we look at this output and we notice that the update source for these peers is loopback 0. In the scenario, we need to be using loopback 1 in order to create the peering that we require. So if we fix that, if we change that to loopback 1, then we check out show IP BGP summary, we see that the sessions are established and they're stable. They're no longer flapping. So we keep working through this in a methodical fashion. Now we notice, okay, well, we have sessions, but we're not receiving prefixes from router 2. If we again do a show IP BGP summary, we see that the reason we're not receiving any routes, BGP session with router 4 is idle. Digging into that, we see this. External BGP neighbor not directly connected. What do we have to do? What's missing? Well, the output, and again, this is what you would actually see on a physical device, the output includes some hints. Single hop, no disable, connected check. Okay, well, let's try to fix that. We can go in then and configure on router 2 that our router 4, our peer, we need to use eBGP multi-hop with a hop factor of 2 in order to get those get the establishment of those peers. Once we do that, we see in show IP BGP summary. Here we go. BGP prefix, BGP session is active, and we are receiving those routes from router 4. Now we keep moving through the scenario. We keep looking to see and spot the problems. We see router 8's loopback cannot be pinged. Going forward, we say, okay, router 3, router 8 interface. We see the next hop, but router 1 can't ping it. Okay, why not? Well, we see that we have to adjust for the fact that the routes we're getting is putting in the wrong next hop. So of course we can't get there. So we just adjust the next hop for the iBGP peer. Wow, sorry, this is the slides aren't updating. Next problem we see, we still can't ping router 8, and we see that our IGP is not synchronized. When I was taking my CCIE back in the day, and this was 99, we weren't allowed to do no sync, but in this case, they didn't say we couldn't, so we can either create a IGP like OSPF, or we can say, you know what, I'm just going to turn off synchronization. Didn't say we couldn't disable it. The exam doesn't say do not disable synchronization. We're going to disable it. So we disable sync. Sorry about that. And now router 8 is reachable. So now we're able to get our peers established. We're starting to receive routes. And again, we're working our way through doing exactly what we would do in a real troubleshooting scenario because we're working with the actual operating system. We can go as far, we have as much latitude as we need to be able to troubleshoot, to be able to configure, to be able to change and manipulate. In here, there are a few more problems. So as we work our way over here, we're going to see other issues in these other routers. Those are left for additional exercise. So you have, again, the full problematic topology, and you have the solution. As you work through these scenarios, as you take back what you need, like if I look at this blueprint and I decide this is an area where I have some weakness, where I haven't practiced enough, this gives you that opportunity then to continue that practice, to build different scenarios and make sure you have absolute confidence before you sit for that exam. So how do you get CML? There's a number of ways. You can download it from the Cisco Learning Network store. We also have in DevNet, right next door to us, in the DevNet sandbox, there is an instance of CML that you can spin up on a 4-hour basis. So you can look at it, you can try it out. Remember, there is that promo I mentioned. So we are giving away copies of the CML Personal Edition for 50% off here at Cisco Live. And once you have that CML, take it, build those scenarios. Start with the scenarios that I provided in that GitHub repository and practice. Get that confidence so that when you sit for that exam, when you face that network issue, you're going to be able to solve it. You're going to pass your exam. You're going to have the skills. You're going to have the confidence. With that, I'll open it up for any questions. Yeah. Does it support Linux appliances, Windows applications? It absolutely does. Because it's modeling or wrapping around the KVM hypervisor, you're able to run any type of x86 64 operating system in that. We ship with Ubuntu, we ship with Alpine Linux. That's part of what you get with CML. There is, if you have access to Windows 10, Windows 2019, you can load that into CML as well. And there's videos. We actually have another GitHub repository, the CML community, that offers example, what we call the device definitions or node definitions for Windows and some of the other some other third-party vendors. Can you run container-based applications on switches? The Catalyst 9000 was just being added to CML now, not yet, but the Catalyst 8000 router, the CSR 1000V router that comes with CML, you are able to run app hosting on that. In addition to the network operating systems, you can run Docker containers like on the Ubuntu node in CML. So it's like any other Ubuntu VM, or you can load CentOS on there if you want, and you'll have a container environment there within the topology. Other questions? So the Catalyst 9000 is new. CML 2.5 is just about to be released. That would be the latest version. It's a virtual, it's not a specific model of Catalyst 9K. It is a general Catalyst 9K-like switch with emulating the Doppler or the Silicon One ASIC. Does require quite a bit of resources to do that, but you can then start to do more of the Cat 9K based simulation and topology mock-ups with that. Other questions? I heard, or I saw AWS and Azure. Can you run CML in Azure? We are working to get CML supported in the in cloud environments, specifically AWS and Azure initially. Unofficially, we have customers who've done it. Officially, we don't support it, but we are working to do that. Not in this next release, but beyond that, the release after that, we should have official AWS and probably Azure cloud support. Can I? NSO. Can you run NSO in CML? You absolutely can. I do it. I have a NSO loaded on Ubuntu image inside CML. Ralph will talk about some of the other features, especially some of the automation you can do in CML. You can run NSO either in it or externally to it and use external connectivity. So you can bring in elements of, say, like the service provider exams with NSO and use that with CML. When I was building the Cisco Live data center topology, I use NSO for that. I had NSO external to that, modeling or applying service configuration to my virtual topology. Can you run DNAC or ICE? Technically, you could. However, the resources required for them, CML caps the virtual machines to 16 CPUs and 32 gig of RAM, which you could get ICE in there, DNAC not so much. But you can use DNAC external to CML to talk to the virtual network elements in CML.